Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so glad to be here. My promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine. It's going to energize your business and help you stay social. Because after all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And welcome, Mike Kaeding.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I am so stoked to have you. And can you tell our audience a little bit about what you do, who you serve?
Yeah, at a high level, we design, build, and rent apartments, but we're really focused on driving down the cost of constructing those homes. Because our dream long-term is to achieve a 50% reduction in costs of housing. But could you imagine someday if your rent or your mortgage payment was half? That's our dream, to solve America's housing affordability crisis.
And how is that going so far for you? Have you been able to reduce costs for building homes?
Well, typically right now we're achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in those costs. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's about where we're at. And we believe that with enough improvements to our process and our infrastructure, we can get to that 50% reduction. In fact, if you look at other industries like manufacturing, for example, over the past 60 years, they've improved labor productivity by 760%. Agriculture has improved it by 1,500%. But during the same time period, construction has done nothing. It's been flat. And so we're just applying the technologies and techniques from those other industries into our own. And we're starting to see success with that.
Is it kind of hard in today's world with the cost of materials and stuff?
Oh, it's incredibly challenging. Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that builds that car. Think the manufacturing infrastructure, the supply chain, all the corporate overhead to make all that a reality. And see, it's no different in our industry. We're working to build the system that builds housing. You know, for so many people right now, they think a lot about on a per project basis, but we're changing that methodology, bringing all the trades and all the workers under one roof, and then building out the system, the infrastructure to produce that housing.
I love that. If you're a contractor today listening to this show, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Boy, you know, one of the first things we did is bring all the work under one roof. And so getting the contractors to work well together is really critical. I've seen stories where one contractor will rip out what another contractor had already done. So I would say at a minimum, build good relationships with the people around you. But to give you some sense of the techniques that we apply, one simple idea is the assembly line. See, in the world of manufacturing, the assembly line revolutionized their work. But how in the world could you do that in construction? You can't take a building and drive it down the line. Well, no. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. And so right now, all of our teams, all the different trades in our building, every 5 hours shift by one unit. So if you look at the end of our building, each set of 5 hours, we have a brand new apartment unit completed. And that one technique alone takes a project that might take 15 months and drives it down to 9.
That's kind of funny. The union kind of does that in a sense. The only problem is they work very, very slow for some reason, and I don't know why. It's like I'm sort of, my husband's in the trade, so I kind of know a little bit about this. So how did you get started in all this? Did you wake up one day and say, gee, I think I might want to be in this industry? How did you get started?
That'd be quite the thing if I just woke up one day and made a big change. It wasn't the case, actually. In fact, I grew up with this. My parents originally started this business. And early on, we lost everything. My dad actually got kidnapped in Peru. Crazy story. But after that, we rebuilt it back up. And so I remember being on site on these small little apartment sites, working with my parents on the projects. And I got a chance to learn with it. But I went up to college and I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And the reason that is that I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I really wrestled with my own ego on that. But what I realized deep down is that I wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact on the world. And if I really wanted to do that, why not take this small business as a starting point to have that kind of impact, at least in the world of housing? So I decided to jump forward. My dad and I doubled this small company in the first couple of years of working together. Then soon after, my dad unexpectedly passed away. And overnight, overnight I became the CEO of the organization. I didn't take that title for many years later because I didn't feel like I had earned it. But we then just started to change things and started to change this industry. And that's sort of the start of all of it.
Tell me, in doing all this, what have been your biggest challenges and lessons that you learned?
Well, the biggest lesson I've ever learned, hands down, is to hire the best people. And when I say the best people, I truly mean the very best. We will fly people in from other states to come work during the week and fly them home on the weekend. In 2007, Steve Jobs announces the iPhone, and one of our employees gets on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement to present some other items to that conference. It's that kind of caliber of people that we like working with. And the reality is, these people change the game. They make things happen. They unlock doors that you didn't know could be unlocked. And see, the thing now, most people will come back and say is, Mike, that sounds expensive. And the truth is, it is on a cost per person basis because you need to pay top of market. But what most people fail to understand is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to 10 times as much. So instead of looking at it from a cost per unit produced, those best people, they're actually your least expensive. For those of you who believe that you can't afford to hire the best, my response is you can't afford not to.
I totally agree with that. Totally agree. You know, that it takes a lot to manage people and a culture. What are some techniques that you have used to manage your company to make it as great as it is today?
Oh man, there is so much. I think there's the basics. You need to define your purpose, mission, values, strategies, goals, and make sure they're well outlined, that they're simple, they're easy to understand, and that their organization and you actually believe them. It matters more that the values align with your beliefs than creating some nice flowery values. Then you make sure to hire to those values, to fire to those values, to promote based upon those values. And for us, we are tenacious with that. Another key aspect is be really thoughtful in hiring. In fact, when we were only a 100-person company, we hired 14 recruiters. Because if you want the best culture, you need the best people. You can't create a great culture without great people. And so you need to identify who those people are in the market. You can't post something on Indeed and hope that great people come to you. It just doesn't work. You need to go proactively out there looking for the best people because they're not looking for jobs. And maybe one unique thing about our company, we stole this from Netflix, but we apply the keeper test. And the idea of this is that managers ask themselves the question, if a particular employee were to quit, how hard would you work to change their mind? If the answer is you would fight tooth and nail to keep them, awesome, they're the right person. If it's anything short of that, then they aren't the right person and they should be moved out of your organization. See, most companies know they want the best and most companies know they don't want the worst. But where we're different than most companies is that we're not okay with the average. In fact, there's many great places for them to work, just not here. And so we actively move people out of the organization that turn out not to truly live up to our values.
I love that. I absolutely love that. You know, it's when I did my first hire, and I'm not a big company at all, but I did my first hire. I actually hired a company. So I hired a company, and what I did is I hired to my Colbier. And
Wow.
so because I wanted somebody, because this is going to be the one person that I'm going to need to get my company to the next level. And because of that, I was able to make another hire and another hire. So it's those type of things that are really important. And it's, to be honest with you, I hear people say this all the time. It is hard to find employees nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And, what besides hiring a recruiter, is there anything else that you do differently to find great employees?
Yeah. So we struggle with that substantially in the world of construction. And the key thing we did differently was hiring on the recruiters. But I'd say beyond that, the more advanced strategies is to start to mark out the entire kind of workforce in your segment, in your area, and try to identify the key players, the key companies that have hired that talent, and then look at who the talent are within those organizations and start to build relationships with those people way before you need it, because those are the top talent that you want to pull in. And having that roster well in advance of needing those people is really critical to finding the best.
I love that. One other question in regards to this topic is, how does the Federal Reserve's interest rate, change and affect real estate development? Because I never quite understood that.
It has a big impact. In fact, if you look at new apartment starts, so the new people starting new construction, the multifamily starts or apartment starts in the United States has fallen by like 70% over the past year. And the reason is because the financials just don't pencil out anymore. As the cost of capital rises, the overall cost of the projects work, and it just doesn't make sense. Where we're a little bit different is that before the rise of interest rates, because of our low cost basis to start with, we never needed to find outside investors or new capital. In fact, all of our projects were completely financed by construction financing. So for us, instead of the deals not making sense, they still make sense for us, but now we're just raising capital more directly. And so we have a new platform called Norhart Invest, where people can earn a high rate of return up to between 6 and 24 months for locking in your money. It feels a little bit like a bank account. It's not a bank. It's not actually a bank account. We're not FDIC insured, but we offer a high rate of return. And so that's our way to pivot in order to make it so that the project still makes sense for us. But for most people, they're pulling out of the market today.
I love that. This is the part of the show now where we kind of get a little bit real. A lot of people who are listening to the show are business owners that want to make a difference in this world. But what would you say you love most about being in business for yourself?
I think for me, I've always wanted to make that meaningful, positive impact, right? My dad died relatively young, and it reminded me how short life really is, right? We only live about 4,000 weeks here on Earth. So the question I ask myself almost every day is, how do I want to spend the minutes I have here on Earth? And being a business owner gives you that control to say, this is how I want to spend my time, and this is how I believe I can make that impact in this world. And that's something I don't think I could do if I was just an employee somewhere else.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people out there that think owning a business is so glamorous and really cool. Your friends think you're cool. But we both know, by the way that you just laughed just now, that there are some challenges, especially in today's world. What would you say is your biggest challenge that you face in trying to run the business, the type of business you're running in today's world?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with your premise. It looks glamorous on the outside. It's a tremendous amount of work. And I get the privilege of meeting a lot of billionaires, for example, or people made meaningful, massive impact in the world. And the story I hear over and over again is the tenacity, the drive, the energy it takes is incredibly immense. For me, over the years, the biggest challenge has been to become okay with failure. So the reality is, anytime we start with something new, we're terrible at it. And somehow in our minds, we get to this point that we just need to be perfect out of the gate. But that's not how it works. You need to get into the game. You need to skin your knee. You need to mess up a little bit. And it's in that process that you learn. In fact, to give you a specific story, early on, after my dad passed away, we had a new project that we were building, 112 unit apartment project. It was large for me at the time, and the city didn't believe I could do it. And they were kind of right. In fact, they shut us down twice. And the second time they pulled me aside and said, Mike, you have to hire a manager to manage what you're doing because you're not good enough. I really struggled. And we had 3 days to hire someone. It was a terrible way to hire someone. And we ended up having them as sort of a front as we worked deeply throughout the back of what was going on. And I remember a few weeks before we were supposed to open, we had a 1,000-foot long water main buried 15 feet in the ground. Somewhere in this main was just a small pinhole leak. We had to go find it. I remember being out there in my nice clothes in the mud from sunrise to sunset every day, just dirty, grimy, gross, trying to find this little leak. Eventually we found it. And then about a week before we were going to open, the city staff came out. It was a half a dozen inspectors, about a half a day inspection. They looked up every nook and cranny of that building. And before the inspection, they thought there was no way we'd be able to get this done in time. And I had families that were about to move into the building. But I remember at the end of it, the head building official came down and pulled me aside in the parking garage and said, Mike, I know we were hard on you, but looking at this building today, this is the nicest project that we've opened in the city. You should be proud. And see, the reality is the whole experience, the years that I was going through all that trauma of my dad passing and the challenges of building this building and not feeling like I'm good enough, that is most of the existence, right? But it's not until that end that you actually feel like you made it and came through.
I love that. And I love that story. And to everyone out there, you know what? Regardless of what you're feeling, whatever you're going through, you are good enough. So I just want to just make sure that everybody knows that. You know, so I'm sure somebody resonated with you today because I certainly did. I could relate to a lot of things you were saying. If someone wants to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way is visiting our website, which is norhart.com. That's NORHART.com. And the most exciting thing there is probably our shows that are live now. The most recent show, and the one we're really proud of, is called Zero to Unicorn. It's about the journey of small business growing to $1 billion scale. The first season was our history, but season 2, we've had some incredible guests. And one of my favorites is Michael Uslan, who's the originator and the executive producer of Batman. And what's amazing about his story is that from the point that he bought the movie rights, which was impressive for a kid to be able to do, from the point he bought the movie rights until the point he was able to get the movie made, it was 10 years. 10 years of being told no, pushed aside, and told he was crazy for this idea. But it just goes to show the amount of tenacity, energy, and drive that it really takes to create a $1 billion kind of idea.
I love that. I love that. And parting words, one piece of advice that you can give my audience that's universal, that will help them move forward and encourage them in their life.
Yeah. Hire the best is one we mentioned, but number 2, we kind of touched on this, is be okay in failure. We all fail. We all feel like we're good enough. That's like human nature. We're also nervous about what other people think of us. But the people that are truly extraordinary, especially as I'm meeting all these amazing people, the thing that really comes down to, honestly, more than anything else, is simply your mindset. If you've got the right mindset that you are worthy, that you are good enough, and that you can accomplish great things, and you're willing to put up the pain to get to that, you can see incredible success.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you so much for being such a great guest. Until next week, everyone, I will see you soon. This is Lorraine from the Biz Gone Social podcast. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at BizGoneSocial for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.